She was just cleaning the mansion, until she saw her childhood photo on the wall. Lena adjusted the strap of her cleaning apron and sighed as she dipped the mop into the soapy bucket. The marble floor beneath her shimmered like water, slick and reflective under the grand chandelier that hung above the foyer. Each stroke she made echoed through the cavernous silence of the mansion, a place so extravagant it felt less like a home and more like a museum. Every surface gleamed, every corner held the weight of decades, and Lena, 26 years old, a contract cleaner with a patchwork past, felt like an intruder in someone else's perfectly preserved memory. She glanced up at the high vaulted ceilings and the spiral staircase that coiled like a snake around the foyer. This wasn't the kind of place you got invited to unless you were wealthy, famous, or very much dead. Yet here she was, called in on short notice by the agency to clean a property she'd only heard whispers about growing up, the infamous Blackridge house. Locals said it was cursed, that its last true resident had vanished years ago, and that no one really knew who owned it anymore. But Lena didn't believe in ghost stories. She believed in rent and groceries and getting paid. After polishing the brass handles on the double oak doors, she made her way down a long, dimly lit corridor. The hallway smelled faintly of lavender and old books, and the air felt colder here, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Paintings and portraits lined the walls, stern-faced men in suits, glamorous women in pearls. But one frame stopped her mid-step. It was a photo, not a painting. A real photograph, framed in silver. And inside it was a little girl. 5 years old, maybe. Auburn curls, a faint birthmark just below her left eye. Wearing a pale blue dress with tiny daisies stitched along the hem. Lena's heart slammed in her chest. That birthmark, it was identical to hers. That dress, it looked exactly like the one she'd worn in an old foster home photo. The memory was fuzzy, but not gone. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the frame, tracing the outline of the girl's face with her eyes. Her own face. She whispered, barely audible, "That can't be me. I've never been here before, right?" Lena had always told herself not to dwell on the past, mostly because there wasn't much of one to dwell on. What she did remember began at 5 years old, barefoot and confused, standing in the middle of a park with a scraped knee and no name. The police found her hours later. When they asked her where she came from, she didn't know. When they asked her name, she made one up, Lena. It just felt right. From that day forward, her life had been a blur of temporary beds and unfamiliar faces. Foster care wasn't cruel to her, it was just hollow. Homes came and went, and so did the people in them. No photos of her as a baby, no stories of first words or birthdays. Nothing before that foggy, half-remembered afternoon in the park. Her social worker eventually gave up looking for leads. No missing person report ever matched her. No family ever came forward. She was a ghost child. No records, no birth certificate, just a file stamped, placed, and a childhood full of secondhand toys. At 26, Lena wasn't bitter about her life. She was tired, yes, but not angry. She worked long hours with a cleaning agency that cycled her between hotels, office buildings, and the occasional mansion owned by someone too rich or too dead to care. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid. Barely. She shared a crumbling apartment with 2 roommates who were always late with rent, and she had a car that sounded like a dying vacuum cleaner. Every day felt like a fight to stay afloat. So when the agency called her the night before with a high-paying last-minute gig, she didn't hesitate. Private estate, they'd said. Out in the hills. Owner rarely shows up. Just clean what you're told and don't go poking around. Easy money. At least, that's what she thought. The mansion loomed like a sleeping giant when she first arrived, tucked behind wrought iron gates and a gravel path that crackled under her tires. Even in the morning light, it felt stuck in time. The structure was massive, with tall windows like watchful eyes and ivy creeping up its stone exterior. Inside, it smelled of aged paper and polished wood. A place where nothing changed and no one left. Her footsteps echoed with every move. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was tense, like the house was waiting for something. The furniture looked like it had stories to tell. Carved oak tables with clawed feet, velvet armchairs with worn patches, shelves filled with books whose titles had long faded into the leather. And then there was Mr. Grayson. He introduced himself at the front door, wearing a tailored black suit and gloves so pristine they looked painted on. In his 60s, maybe 70s, he stood tall and straight, with eyes so sharp they could cut glass. "The East Wing is off limits," he said without smiling. "Stay in the main areas. You'll be paid at the end of the week." Lena nodded and kept her head down, but she couldn't ignore the way he watched her. Always just at the edge of her vision. Never walking loudly. Never speaking unless she asked something. He seemed to glide from room to room, as if he were part of the house itself. At times, she wasn't even sure he blinked. She tried not to let it get to her. Focused on scrubbing, vacuuming, polishing. But the mansion had its own way of breathing. Whispers in the air vents, locked doors with no keys, rooms where the temperature dropped suddenly. Even the clocks ticked slightly off rhythm. She'd cleaned rich homes before, but this one wasn't just rich. It was old. Alive maybe. Watching. And when she saw that photo in the hallway, the one with the little girl who looked exactly like her, it cracked something open. For the first time in years, Lena didn't feel like a stranger in someone else's house. She felt like a memory trying to claw its way back. The rest of the day dragged on like wet concrete, but Lena's mind wasn't on her work anymore. Her hands scrubbed and dusted, but her eyes kept drifting toward the corridor, the one with the silver-framed photograph. She hadn't been allowed to linger long earlier. Mr. Grayson had appeared like a shadow behind her, clearing his throat, his expression unreadable. But the image had seared itself into her memory. The girl in the photo wasn't just familiar. She was Lena, or someone who could be her identical twin. And the dress, that pale blue cotton dress with little daisy petals embroidered along the hem. Lena could feel it. The fabric. The way the flowers tickled her knees when she spun around. It was hers. And the knowledge hit her like a silent scream. That night, long after she should have clocked out, Lena pretended to misplace a pair of gloves just so she could stay behind. Mr. Grayson, always meticulous with schedules, narrowed his eyes at her when she made the excuse. 15 minutes, he said. Then I'll have to lock up the main floors. She nodded, waited until she heard his footsteps retreat to the eastern wing, and slipped quietly back into the hallway. The photo was still there, hung neatly between a painting of a stern-looking man and a faded tapestry. Her fingers trembled as she lifted it from the wall. Up close, the frame was heavier than she expected. Tarnished with age. She turned it over. There, scratched faintly into the metal backing, was a date. Or part of one. 199_ was all she could make out. The last number had been rubbed or scraped away. But the more unsettling detail was what she found carved, almost too faint to see, along the inner bottom of the frame. Her initials. Lena Rose, the name the social worker had given her, had always felt like a guess. But this was something else. Something impossible. As she stared at the frame, flashes burst in her mind. Not memories, exactly. Just sensations. The smell of lilacs. The sound of wind chimes on a balcony. Laughter, her laughter, echoing through a garden lined with rose bushes. A woman twirling in a lavender dress. Arms lifting her up, spinning her around. Safety. Warmth. And then it was gone. Like the snap of a candle's flame. She took a breath and turned, scanning the hallway. She needed more. Something, anything, to prove this wasn't just her mind playing tricks. Her feet moved with a purpose now. Past the library. Down the corridor lined with dusty curtains. At the very end, half hidden behind a potted plant, she found a door that didn't match the others. No gold handles. No ornate carving. Just a simple wooden door with paint peeling from its hinges. She pressed the handle. Unlocked. Inside was a cramped storage closet. Shelves crammed with boxes, bags, old books, and loose lamp parts. But what drew her attention was the plastic bin on the floor labeled in faded marker, Playroom. Heart hammering, she knelt and opened it. Toys. Dozens of them. Worn dolls, wooden blocks, tiny mismatched shoes. And there, buried beneath it all, was a small, gray elephant. Its fur was flattened, the eyes scratched. One ear was completely torn off, leaving just a threadbare stub. Lena gasped. She knew this elephant. She could still remember sleeping with it pressed against her cheek, biting the remaining ear when she was nervous. This wasn't déjà vu. This was proof. She had been here, in this house, long before she ever became Lena Rose. Before foster care. Before the park. The mansion wasn't just an old job site anymore. It was a missing piece of her soul. Lena found herself drawn back to the hallway the next morning, the photograph lingering in her thoughts like a ghost she couldn't shake. The image of the little girl, so familiar, yet so distant, was etched deep into her mind, pulling her toward answers she didn't know how to ask for. When Mr. Grayson passed by polishing the banister, she seized her chance. "Mr. Grayson," she began, trying to keep her voice steady, "the girl in that photo, who is she?" The older man paused, eyes narrowing beneath thick brows. He wiped his hands on his trousers and looked away, as if trying to hide something beneath his calm exterior. "That was the master's daughter," he said flatly. "Lillian Rose. She died long ago." Lena's heart skipped. Died? How? Mr. Grayson's expression hardened, the shadow of some old sorrow crossing his face. Disappeared, really. She was 5 years old. One day she was here, the next, she was gone. Never found. Lena blinked. "But the photo?" "An empty casket," he said, voice low. "The family held a funeral, but no body was ever recovered. They say it was an accident. Some accident in the gardens. Or maybe a tragic kidnapping. No one knows for sure." Her mind spun. Lillian Rose. The name was so close to her own. The initials on the frame, the birthmark she shared with the girl in the photo, it couldn't be coincidence. "You look like her," Mr. Grayson said quietly, breaking her thoughts. His eyes held a strange weight as he studied her. "It's strange, almost unsettling. But you're not. You're just imagining things." Lena felt her chest tighten, a mixture of hope and fear twisting inside her. What if she was Lillian? What if the life she'd lived, the foster homes, the missing years, was a lie or a cover-up? What if the girl who disappeared from the Blackridge estate was her? "Why would I be abandoned?" she whispered to herself, the question hanging heavy in the air. Mr. Grayson's face softened just for a moment. "That house has secrets. Not all of them meant to be uncovered." Lena left the conversation more shaken than she expected. The mansion wasn't just a place she cleaned, it was a puzzle she was desperate to solve. And the first piece might just be her own forgotten past. Lena's days became consumed with quiet investigation. Every spare moment was spent piecing together fragments of a past that seemed just beyond reach. She scoured the mansion's library, sifting through dusty ledgers and brittle newspapers tucked between heavy volumes. She looked for anything, birth records, news clippings, even old journals, that might shed light on Lillian Rose's disappearance. But the mansion guarded its secrets closely. Most files were locked away or labeled private, in faded script. One afternoon, while dusting near the eastern wing, the one Mr. Grayson always forbade her to enter, Lena's heart jumped when she noticed the door slightly ajar. A thin sliver of light leaked into the dim hallway. No sound came from inside. It was as if the house itself had whispered an invitation. Her hands trembled as she pushed the door open further, stepping into a room untouched by time. Pale wallpaper, once bright with floral patterns, peeled softly at the edges. A small bed with a lace canopy sat neatly made. On the nightstand, a delicate porcelain music box gleamed faintly in the sunlight filtering through lace curtains. The room felt sacred. Everything was arranged carefully, as if someone had simply stepped out and planned to return any moment. Lena's eyes scanned the walls. Photographs of a young girl with curly hair and a shy smile stared back at her, Lillian Rose. One picture showed the child standing beside a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Drawings, probably made by a small hand, were pinned to a corkboard above the desk. Crayons and paintbrushes lay scattered beneath. The art depicted gardens, butterflies, and a towering mansion that looked eerily like Blackridge House. The music box caught Lena's attention next. She hesitated, then carefully lifted the lid. The familiar melody drifted softly through the room, a tune she knew deep in her bones, though she couldn't place when she had heard it before. It was a lullaby her mother used to hum, or maybe it was a dream she once had. Either way, it stirred something buried deep inside her. Drawn by a sudden impulse, Lena examined the dresser nearby. The heavy oak furniture was ornate, carved with swirling vines and flowers. She ran her fingers over the surface until they found a small catch cleverly hidden beneath the edge of one drawer. Her breath caught as the drawer slid open to reveal a bundle of yellowed letters tied with a faded ribbon. She pulled one out gently, unfolding the fragile paper with care. The handwriting was elegant, but hurried. "Margot," Lena whispered, recognizing the signature at the bottom. Margot had been the housekeeper here 20 years ago, a woman whose name had come up only in passing during conversations with Mr. Grayson. The letter's words sent a chill down Lena's spine. "I know what he did to her." She was never supposed to find out. Her hands shook. Who was he? What had happened to Lillian? And who wanted to keep it hidden so badly that Margot had vanished without a trace? For the first time, Lena realized this wasn't just a story of loss. It was a story of secrets, dark ones, and she was right in the middle of it. The soft notes of the music box filled the silent room, weaving a lullaby that seemed to echo across years and memories. Lena sat on the edge of the bed, the melody wrapping around her like a fragile thread, pulling at something buried deep inside. As the tune played, her breathing slowed, and suddenly the walls around her faded away, replaced by vivid scenes flashing before her eyes. She was in the garden, the sprawling, manicured grounds of Blackridge House. Sunlight filtered through towering oak trees, dappling the lush green grass. She was running, little feet pounding the earth, heart racing with a mix of fear and determination. Behind her, a man's voice bellowed, sharp and angry. "Come back here, Lillian," he shouted, heavy footsteps chasing her. She ducked behind the thick hedges, pressing her small body into the cool shadows, gasping for breath. Nearby, a woman screamed, a raw, desperate cry that ripped through the air. Lena's gaze caught sight of the woman struggling against strong arms, being carried away toward a dark car waiting at the gate. Bright headlights flashed, blinding and relentless. Then everything went black. Lena snapped back to the present, heart pounding, palms sweaty. The fragments of the past were more than dreams. Someone had tried to erase her history, her identity. Someone wanted Lillian Rose Blackridge to vanish. Determined to find proof, Lena rushed outside to the garden she now recognized. The same hedges from her flashback stood tall and untamed, guarding the secrets buried beneath. After hours of searching, she spotted a loose patch of earth hidden beneath a rose bush. With trembling hands, she dug into the soil until her fingers brushed against something hard. She unearthed a small wooden box, worn and weathered by time. Inside lay a photograph, edges yellowed with age. It showed a young woman with soft eyes cradling a small girl, the same child from the photo on the mansion's wall. Written in delicate script across the bottom were the words, "Margot and Lily, Summer '04. Lena clutched the photo tightly. The woman from her flashback was Margot, the housekeeper who had disappeared. The girl was undeniably her. Her breath caught in her throat. She was Lillian Rose Blackridge, the lost daughter of Blackridge House. The truth was no longer a whisper. It was a roaring fire, burning away the shadows of her forgotten past. Lena's hands trembled as she stood before Mr. Grayson in the dimly lit study, the weight of all she had uncovered pressing down on her like a storm. Her voice was steady but fierce as she demanded, "Why did you erase me? Why did no one tell me who I really am?" Mr. Grayson sighed heavily, his face a mask of regret and sorrow. He looked away for a moment, as if reliving painful memories. Then, slowly, he began to speak. "Charles Blackridge was a man both feared and respected," he said quietly. "A titan in business, but with many enemies who wanted to see his downfall. When threats started coming against the family, he made a decision, a desperate one." He paused, searching Lena's eyes. "He staged your disappearance. It was supposed to be for your protection. Margot, the housekeeper you found letters from, was entrusted to raise you in secret, away from danger." Lena's heart pounded. "But Margot died." Mr. Grayson nodded gravely. "A tragic car accident. After that, You were lost in the system. The family searched quietly, but the world never knew you were still alive. Lena's throat tightened. And my father? He was consumed by guilt, Mr. Grayson said softly. Charles locked himself away in this mansion, refusing to face the world or himself. He died alone, haunted by what happened to you. Lena's mind reeled. So much pain, so many lies layered over the truth she had longed for. Mr. Grayson took a deep breath. I knew who you were the moment you arrived weeks ago. But I waited for you to remember on your own, to find the pieces in your own time. Tears pricked at Lena's eyes, a mixture of grief, anger, and relief washing over her. The man who had been just a distant figure was now the keeper of her story, the witness to a tragedy she was only beginning to understand. You were never meant to be forgotten, he whispered. But some truths take time to surface. Lena nodded, steeling herself for what lay ahead. The past had been hidden, but now it was hers to face, and to reclaim. Lena left the mansion that evening with a whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her, shock, sorrow, anger, but also a flicker of hope she hadn't felt in years. 4 days, she withdrew from the world, seeking solitude in a small, quiet cabin far from the city's noise. She spent hours writing in a journal, untangling memories and feelings that had been buried beneath layers of confusion for so long. Slowly, the fragments of her past began to align into a clearer picture. She realized that reclaiming her identity wasn't just about a name or an inheritance. It was about reclaiming herself, her history, her dignity, her future. When she returned to Blackridge House, Lena was no longer just a cleaner. She was Lillian Rose Blackridge, the rightful heir. With the help of a compassionate lawyer, Lena collected DNA samples from old hairbrushes found in the mansion's attic and matched them with records stored in a distant family archive. The results were undeniable. Her identity was confirmed beyond any doubt. As the legal process unfolded, Lena inherited the sprawling estate, along with the weight of her family's dark past. The mansion's walls seemed to whisper stories of loss and secrets, but also resilience and hope. Rather than selling the property or abandoning it to the ghosts of the past, Lena made a decision that felt both daring and deeply personal. She converted a wing of the mansion into a foster care home and educational center, dedicated to Margot, the housekeeper who had cared for her in secret and whose letters had guided her journey. The center offered children like her a safe haven, a place where they could heal, learn, and grow, free from the shadows that had haunted her own childhood. The mansion, once a symbol of mystery and pain, now breathed new life and purpose. In the hallway where she had first seen the photo that changed everything, Lena hung the framed picture of her younger self, not as a ghost from the past, but as a beacon of survival and strength. Every time she passed by it, she whispered a silent thank you to the little girl who had survived, and to the woman she had become. Lena's journey was far from over, but now she faced the future with courage, knowing she had finally reclaimed what was always hers. Lena strode down the familiar hallway, the sound of her polished shoes echoing softly against the marble floor. Gone were the worn cleaning clothes she had worn for months. Instead, she wore a tailored blazer that gave her the confidence she had always lacked. Her eyes settled on the photo, the little girl in the lavender dress, framed forever on the wall. A gentle smile tugged at her lips as she whispered to herself, I came here with nothing but a mop and a paycheck. I left with my name, my past, and my purpose. Her voice softened, almost like a quiet confession. Turns out, I wasn't just cleaning the mansion. I was coming home. The camera lingered as she turned and walked toward the once-forgotten wing of the estate. The door swung open to reveal a bright, lively children's reading room filled with colorful books, laughter, and hope, a testament to new beginnings. The screen faded to black, leaving the sense that Lena's story was just beginning.